Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one.
Security cameras today are everywhere. Poles, stores, doorbells, cars, police helmets. They record 24 hours a day, and most of the time, nobody pays attention. But in some cases, these electronic eyes captured the last minutes of people who were about to die. Some victims did not know they were being filmed. Some even looked at the camera. 15 real cases where the recording became evidence, a late warning, or an unanswered mystery. Case number 1, James Bulger. On the afternoon of February 12, 1993, Denise Bulger entered the New Strand shopping center in Bootle, near Liverpool, with her 2-year-old son, James. It was almost 4 in the afternoon. She stopped at the A.R. Tim's butcher shop to pay for her purchase and let go of the boy's hand for less than a minute. When she turned around, James was gone. There was no scream, no visible commotion. The baby in the light blue tracksuit was simply no longer there in the store. The police were called minutes later. Within 2 hours, more than 100 officers were sweeping the streets around the shopping center. Helicopters flew over the nearby canals. Neighbors conducted door-to-door searches. For 2 full days, there was not a single solid lead that pointed anywhere. Denise repeated to the press that her son did not know anyone in Bootle, that there was no way he could have left on his own. The entire city became a manhunt for a boy in a light blue tracksuit. On February 14th, 2 days after the disappearance, a group of teenagers was walking near the tracks at Walton and Anfield Station, about 2.5 miles from the shopping center. They found James's body severed by the tracks. The autopsy report described 42 injuries, 10 skull fractures, blue paint on the face, and batteries shoved into the mouth. The forensic examiners concluded that the train ran over him after death, in an attempt to make it look like an accident. The police recovered the tapes from the cameras at the New Strand Center. What appeared on the screen did not make sense to the investigators who watched first. James was being led by the hand, but not by an adult. The images showed a child much younger than any imaginable suspect, leading the baby out of the shopping center. Another boy appears further ahead. The scene looked normal. 3 boys walking together. None of the dozens of people who passed by them suspected anything. The image aired on the BBC a few hours later. A neighbor recognized the 2 boys and called the police. On February 18th, officers knocked on the doors of Robert Thompson and John Venables, both 10 years old. They were schoolmates, frequently skipped class, and had spent the morning of the 12th stealing candy, a troll doll, batteries, and a can of blue paint at the shopping center. The original plan, according to one of them, was to push a child into traffic. Instead of traffic, they led James by the hand for more than 2 miles to the tracks at Walton. 28 people saw the trio during the walk. Some noticed the little one was crying but accepted explanations from the older boys that he was a lost younger brother. Once at the tracks, they beat James with bricks, batteries, and the stolen blue paint. The physical evidence, blood on clothing, sneaker marks, and the paint linked the 2 to the crime definitively. Robert and John were tried as adults in November of 1993, seated in raised chairs so they could reach the dock. They were convicted on November 24th, the 2 youngest murderers in modern British history. The initial sentence was detention until they turned 18. In 2001, both were released with new identities under lifetime license. Venables returned to prison in 2010 and 2017 for possession of child abuse images on computers. Case number 2, the girl at the car wash. On February 1st, 2004, Super Bowl Sunday, Carly Bruscia was 11 years old and walking home from a friend's house in Sarasota, Florida. It was early evening, the sky still light. To take a shortcut, she crossed the parking lot of Evie's Car Wash on Bee Ridge Road. A security camera at the back of the establishment recorded without audio that part of the property. Everything that happened in the next 20 seconds was captured. The recording shows Carly walking with her backpack on when a man in a mechanic's uniform appears from the right side of the frame. He approaches her, exchanges a few words, and then grips her arm firmly. Carly tries to resist slightly. The man pulls her out of the camera frame. 30 minutes later, the parents reported the disappearance to the Sarasota police. The image was grainy, but showed a white man, dark hair, visible tattoos on the arms, wearing a mechanic shop uniform. The FBI entered the case. Researchers processed the video in a laboratory to reduce the image noise. The enhanced version was broadcast on national television. In less than 24 hours, 2 different informants called the police, identifying the man as Joseph P. Smith, 37 years old, a mechanic at a nearby shop. Smith was already in custody, detained for a parole violation in another case at the time of the broadcast. For 2 days, he refused to talk. On February 5th, he directed investigators to where he had left the body. Carly was found behind the Central Church of Christ, next to a vegetation area a few miles from the car wash. She had been raped and strangled. The clothing and backpack had been discarded in separate trash cans to make identification harder. Smith's trial lasted 3 weeks in November of 2005. He had an extensive history of drug arrests and a prior kidnapping charge from which he had been acquitted. The jury convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to death in March of 2006. The sentence was commuted to life in 2018 and reversed back to death in 2020. Smith died on death row at Union Correctional Institution on July 26, 2021, at 55 years old. The cause was never disclosed. Case number 3, the woman killed by a police officer. Sarah Everard was 33 years old, a marketing executive, and lived in Brixton Hill in South London. On the early evening of March 3, 2021, she left to visit a friend in Clapham Junction. On the way, she stopped at the Sainsbury's on Brixton Hill near her home. The CCTV of the store recorded the moment Sarah arrives and buys a bottle of wine. It was the last financial transaction she would ever make. Sarah spent a few hours at her friend's house on Leithwaite Road near Clapham Junction. Around 9 at night, she left to walk home. She spoke on the phone with her boyfriend, Josh Loth, for about 15 minutes during the walk. They made plans to see each other the next day. Several residential doorbell cameras and even the dashcam of a moving police cruiser recorded Sarah walking alone through the streets of South London that night. At 9:34, Wayne Cousins, 48 years old, an off-duty officer of the Metropolitan Police, parked a rented white Vauxhall Astra on the sidewalk of Pointers Court and approached Sarah. He showed his badge. He handcuffed her wrists. Witnesses driving past on the street saw the scene. They assumed it was a plainclothes detective arresting a woman for violating the COVID lockdown. Nobody stopped. Nobody called 999. The arrest looked completely legitimate. Minutes later, 2 different buses passed along Pointers Road. The CCTV of both vehicles recorded Sarah and Cousins next to the Vauxhall, with hazard lights on. Those were the last images of her alive. Cousins drove for more than 2 hours to Dover in Kent. At some point during the early morning, he transferred Sarah to his own personal car, a Seat. In the rural area near Shepherd's Well, his phone connected to local towers for more than an hour. The prosecution later concluded that Cousins raped Sarah in Shepherd's Well. Before dawn, he had already strangled her with his own police service belt. He took the body to Hodes Wood, a forested area near Ashford where he rented a piece of land. 2 days later, he bought gasoline and burned Sarah inside an old abandoned refrigerator at the site. He then dumped the remains in a nearby pond using construction bags purchased at B&Q. The investigators compiled 1,800 hours of CCTV and identified the white Vauxhall Astra. License plate reading cameras tracked the car to a rental company in Dover. The company revealed the name of the renter, Wayne Cousins, serving officer of the Metropolitan Police. On March 9th, officers knocked on his door in Deal. 39 minutes earlier, Cousins had tried to erase all data from his phone. At the Old Bailey, he received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Case number 4, the Moab Bodycam. On August 12, 2021, the Moab, Utah, police received a call from a witness. A young couple was fighting near the Moonflower Community Cooperative, with the man apparently hitting the woman before they got into a white van. Officer Eric Pratt stopped the van near the entrance of Arches National Park. Inside were Gabby Petito, 22 years old, and her fiancé Brian Laundrie, 23. The body cameras stayed on for 52 minutes. The recording shows Gabby crying uncontrollably in the passenger seat. She tells the officers she had OCD and anxiety, that she was stressed about the travel blog, and that Laundrie always discouraged her work. At one point, she admits she hit him first. When Pratt insists whether Laundrie hit back, she hesitates. I think, yes, but I hit first. A witness had told police he saw Brian slapping her face. The officers do not follow that line. At another point in the body cam, Officer Pratt says to his colleague Daniel Robbins, "You know why the Domestic Violence Code exists. It is to protect people. They do not give us discretion because many times women in danger want to go back to the abuser, and then they end up being killed." And yet the 2 officers decided to classify the incident as a mental health crisis and not domestic violence. They determined that Gabby was the primary aggressor. No arrest, no charges filed. The solution adopted was to separate the couple for one night. Brian was sent to a motel paid for by the police. Gabby stayed with the van. They reunited the next day. 3 weeks later, on August 30th, Gabby made her last Instagram post. On September 1st, Brian returned alone to his parents' house in Florida, driving her van. Gabby's parents reported the disappearance on September 11th. The case became the biggest missing person coverage phenomenon on TikTok. Gabby's remains were found on September 19th in the Bridger Teton National Forest in Wyoming. The Teton County Medical Examiner determined manual strangulation as the cause, with time of death between August 27th and 30th. Brian Laundrie had fled to a reserve near his home in Northport, Florida. On October 20th, his body was found there, with a gunshot to the head. Next to him, a notebook where he confessed to killing Gabby. The Moab police never explained the decision. Gabby's family sued the city of Moab for $50 million in a wrongful death action. The argument, If the police had followed the Utah domestic violence statute, which requires arrest or citation, Brian would have been detained and Gabby would probably be alive. In 2022, Moab settled for $3 million. Eric Pratt, the senior officer from the Bodycam, was promoted to detective in 2022. The case reshaped the discussion of domestic violence in the United States. Case number 5, the drunk student at the mall. Hannah Graham, 18 years old, British by birth, in her second year at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. On the night of September 12, 2014, she went to a pre-bar at the Fig restaurant with friends around 10:48 and then to a party at the Camden Plaza apartments on 14th Street. She left alone around midnight. Instead of going back to her apartment, she walked in the opposite direction toward the downtown mall. She was visibly drunk. Surveillance cameras from at least 6 establishments on the downtown mall recorded Hannah starting at 12:44. She appears walking unsteadily, stumbling once. At one point, a pub doorman turned her away. 10 minutes later, she was filmed running through a gas station. At 12:56, she sent a message to friends saying, "I am lost." It was her last communication. Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr., 32 years old, a surgical center technician at the UVA hospital, was wandering the same area. The cameras show Matthew walking in the opposite direction from Hannah on the mall. At a certain point, he turns around and begins following her. He picks up the pace, catches up to Hannah, and puts his arm around her shoulders. 2 women witnessed the approach up close. They found it strange. One of them had crossed paths with Matthew minutes earlier and said to her friend a phrase that entered the case files, "That guy does not know her." The 2 women followed the couple out of suspicion to the Tempo restaurant. They sat at the same counter. Matthew paid for the drinks with his card. Hannah seemed increasingly disoriented. Shortly after, the couple left the bar together. It was the last time Hannah Graham was seen alive. A witness passing by on the street moments later heard Hannah shout at Matthew a phrase that would be etched into the investigation: "I'm not getting in that car with you." The manager of another mall restaurant reviewed the footage from her own camera and noticed Matthew making the U-turn to follow Hannah. She alerted the police. On September 18th, Matthew showed up at the police station asking for a lawyer, fled before interrogation, and became a fugitive. 6 days later, he was found sleeping in a beach tent in Galveston, Texas, about 1,200 miles from Charlottesville, 5 weeks after the crime. Hannah's remains were found on an abandoned property. Matthew's arrest unlocked other cases. Police collected a cigar tip from his wallet. The DNA-matched material recovered from the murder of Morgan Harrington, a Virginia Tech student killed in 2009 after leaving a Metallica concert in Charlottesville. It also matched DNA under the fingernail of a rape victim in Fairfax in 2005, known as RG. In Fairfax, he entered an Alford plea. In March of 2016, he confessed to Graham and Harrington to avoid the death penalty. He is currently serving his sentence at Red Onion State Prison. Case number 6, the girls in the Manchester United shirts. On August 4th, 2002, Sunday, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, both 10 years old, inseparable best friends, were having lunch at a barbecue at the Wells family home in Soham, Cambridgeshire. They wore identical red Manchester United shirts. Around 6:15, without telling the adults, they left to buy candy from the vending machine at the Ross Piers Sports Center. They never came home. Before leaving, their photo at the barbecue was taken. It ended up becoming one of the most recognizable images of crime in the United Kingdom. The 2 cameras at the sports center confirmed the girls' arrival at the machine and their departure shortly after. On the way back, they passed the house of Ian Huntley, 28 years old, caretaker of Soham Village College. Huntley was the boyfriend of Maxine Carr, an assistant to both girls at their primary school. To the girls, he was a familiar and safe adult. That afternoon, Huntley was home alone. Carr had traveled to visit her mother in Grimsby, about 125 miles away. Huntley had argued with her on the phone minutes earlier, accusing her of cheating. He called the girls inside, lying that Maxine would be there. Holly and Jessica entered. What happened inside the house was never fully clarified. Huntley claimed at the trial that Holly fell into the bathtub, and Jessica screamed, being silenced by him. The police mounted one of the largest search operations in British history, Operation Fincham. More than 400 officers and thousands of volunteers combed the region. Huntley presented himself as a cooperating witness and gave several interviews to the press, pretending to help. He said he was one of the last people to have seen the girls alive. Maxine Carr gave a false alibi, claiming to have been at home with Huntley that afternoon. Investigators began to suspect the couple. On August 17th, 13 days after the disappearance, the bodies were found near RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, about 15 miles from Soham. They had been burned in an attempt to hide forensic traces. Huntley and Carr were arrested. Fibers from the girls' shirts were found in his house and in his car. On December 17th, 2003, Huntley was convicted of double murder and received 2 life sentences with a minimum of 40 years. The case caused permanent changes in the United Kingdom. A subsequent investigation discovered that Huntley had multiple prior complaints for sexual crimes against teenagers. None checked in his background when the school hired him. The scandal led to the creation of the Independent Safeguarding Authority in 2009, a national background check system for work with children. The photos of the girls in their red Manchester United shirts are still shown in police training. Case number 7, the target stalker. Kelsey Smith was 18 years old, had graduated from high school 9 days earlier, and wanted to buy a 6-month anniversary gift for her boyfriend John. On the evening of June 2, 2007, she left her home alone in Overland Park, Kansas, driving her own car to the Target near Oak Park Mall. She called her mom upon arriving, asking where the gift boxes were. It was the last conversation they had. The store's camera system captured everything. The frame-by-frame analysis later revealed what nobody saw at the time. While Kelsey walked through the aisles, a white man in a white t-shirt followed her, aisle by aisle. He appeared in the background of the frame, then in the corner, then very close. He waited for her to choose the gifts, waited for her to go to the register, and left before her. An external camera recorded his black pickup truck leaving the store parking lot seconds before Kelsey appeared with the bags. The family reported the disappearance when she did not return. Her sister and boyfriend John went out through the area trying to find the car. They found her vehicle parked on the other side of Oak Park Mall, near Macy's, nearly half a mile from the Target. It was unlocked, with purse, phone, and gifts still inside. Another camera, now from Macy's, showed what mattered. At 9:17, more than 2 hours after the last call, the car arrives at the parking lot, and a man exits from the driver's seat. Investigators cross-referenced the Target cameras and identified the same white t-shirt following Kelsey through the aisles hours earlier. One of the Target entrance cameras had a single sharper image of his face. The police released it to the press. A neighbor of a man saw it on TV and called the station. On June 6th, officers arrested Edwin Hall, 26 years old, at his house. He was packing bags with his wife and children for an alleged trip. He confessed to going to the Target that day, but denied any involvement with Kelsey. The police had found an unknown fingerprint on the seatbelt of her car. Hall's fingerprints were taken. They matched perfectly. That same day, Kelsey's body was found near Longview Lake in Missouri, about 19 miles from the Target. The case became a landmark in the use of cell tower triangulation by carriers. The location of her phone was discovered within hours by investigators after Verizon released the data under protest. Kelsey's mother, Missy Smith, later founded an organization and lobbied for the Kelsey Smith Act, a state and later federal law that requires carriers to hand over location data in emergencies without a warrant. Hall confessed in July of 2008 to avoid the death penalty. He got life. Case number 8. Sian O'Callaghan, 22 years old, secretary at a company in Swindon, England, went out on the night of March 18, 2011, for a night with friends at the Suju nightclub in Old Town. At 2:52 in the morning on the 19th, security cameras recorded her leaving the venue, walking toward the apartment she shared with her boyfriend, Kevin Reap. The distance was about half a mile. Sian was drunk, 3 times above the legal blood alcohol limit. The cameras from the entire area were reviewed. A green Toyota Avensis taxi appears, circling the vicinity of the Suju for approximately 40 minutes before Sian's departure. The driver was Christopher Hallowell, 47 years old, a local cab driver. That night, he had turned off the radio of the 5-Star Taxis company at 2:13 and was off duty. He had no passengers, no destination. The footage shows him circling and circling until he saw Sian. Then he stopped, made a U-turn, and parked beside her. At the exact moment of the approach, Hallowell turned on the taxi's hazard lights to create a glare on the CCTV camera lenses. In every image of that instant, there is an intermittent glow that hides what happens when the vehicle stops beside O'Callaghan. It was the method he found to obscure what he was about to do. Sian got in the car. The taxi headed towards Savernake Forest. Her phone remained active. Through carrier towers, it was tracked to Savernake that early morning. Kevin Reap, her boyfriend, sent a message at 3:24 asking where she was. The phone received it, but did not respond. On March 24th, police arrested Hallowell when he tried to buy an excessive dose of pills at a Swindon pharmacy. Detective Stephen Fulcher pressured him at Barbary Castle. Without a lawyer present, Hallowell led police to the body in Uffington. Hallowell confessed right there to a second crime. In 2003, 8 years earlier, he had killed Becky Godden, 20 years old, a sex worker from Swindon, and buried her in a field in Eastleach, Gloucestershire. He indicated the location. Police found the remains, but the confession about Becky was thrown out in court for violation of PACE rules, and Fulcher ended up convicted of misconduct. Hallowell got life with a minimum of 25 years for Sian's crime, and in 2016 was also convicted for Becky with a whole life order. Case number 9, the Valentine's Day syringe. On February 14th, 2017, Ellie Tran, 35 years old, a Yahoo engineer, was returning home from work to her house in San Jose, California. Vietnamese by birth, she had immigrated to the United States years earlier. Mother of a 2-year-old daughter, the security cameras she herself had installed around the residence, out of fear of her ex-boyfriend, captured her arrival at the garage around 8 at night. The man she feared was already waiting. The recording shows Ellie getting out of the car with bags. From the darkness of a bush beside the entrance, a figure comes running and knocks her to the ground in less than 2 seconds. The attacker pins her for an instant, makes a quick movement with his right hand, and runs off down the street without saying a word. There was no robbery, there was no prolonged assault. Ellie gets up, appears to scream at the attacker, and then goes to the door. She tried to call emergency services, but she collapses before managing to dial. Ellie's mother, who was inside the house, saw everything through the window and recognized the attacker. It was Joseph Marino III, 30 years old, Ellie's ex-boyfriend and father of her daughter. The quick movement on the ground had been the injection of cyanide into a vein in her leg. The compound blocks the use of oxygen by cells. It kills in minutes. Ellie arrived at the hospital with brain death. Her parents authorized disconnecting the machines shortly after. Marino was arrested on February 17th. At his home, police found weapons and explosives. The relationship between the two had deteriorated in 2014, when Ellie brought her parents from Vietnam to live with them. Marino became aggressive. In mid-2016, Ellie separated, obtained a restraining order, and got full custody of the daughter. The cameras were installed out of fear. In December of 2016, Ellie had suffered a still mysterious attack. Someone threw a chemical liquid on her in the street, burning her hair and scalp. She told her mother she was certain it had been Marino. She could not prove it. The prosecution was built quickly. The search history on his computer contained questions about what happens if cyanide is injected and enters the bloodstream, the dose needed to kill. Police traced his purchases of cyanide and syringes on marketplaces like eBay and Etsy. Marino went on a hunger strike before the trial in an attempt to change his appearance. It did not work. In December of 2018, he was convicted of premeditated homicide, sentence, life. Case number 10, the spring break teenager. Brittanee Drexel, 17 years old, from Rochester, New York, lied to her mother in April of 2009. She said she was going to spend a few days at a friend's house. In reality, she boarded an unauthorized spring break trip to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, with an older group. On April 25th, Saturday, staying at the Bar Harbor Hotel, she left to visit a friend at the Blue Water Resort, about a mile and a half away along the shore. The Blue Water camera was the last to see her alive. The recording shows Brittanee arriving at the Blue Water lobby at 8:33. She spent about an hour in her friend Peter Brozowitz's room. She left alone around 9 at night. She sent a message to her boyfriend in Rochester, saying she was walking back along Ocean Boulevard. The avenue was full of tourists, neon, and families. The municipal cameras in Myrtle Beach at the time were few and low resolution. After Brittanee left the hotel's frame, no other image of her appeared. The investigation stalled for 13 years. In 2009, the FBI went so far as to publish the hypothesis that she had been taken to a stash house used by gangs, held captive, and killed. There was never concrete proof. In 2019 and 2020, new investigators reopened the recordings and phone data. The last ping from her device changed from walking speed to more than 50 miles per hour in a few seconds. That was the point where she stopped walking and was placed in a vehicle. Raymond Moody lived in a cheap motel a few miles from where Brittanee had vanished. He had served half of a 40-year sentence in California for sexual assaults before returning to his hometown, Georgetown. The day after Brittanee's disappearance, he was stopped at a checkpoint near Myrtle Beach. He had scratches on his face. That detail made him an initial suspect, but there was not enough evidence for an indictment. But in May of 2022, Moody confessed. He led investigators to Pole Yard Boat Landing, a fishing area near the North Santee River, south of Georgetown. That was where he raped and strangled Brittanee. Her body had been buried about 10 miles away in a remote forested area. The remains were recovered on May 11, 2022. On October 19th, Moody pleaded guilty to murder, kidnapping, and criminal sexual conduct. He got life, plus 60 years. Case number 11, honeymoon murder. Ani Hindocha Dewani, 28 years old, Swedish of Indian origin, married Sian Dewani, a British businessman from Bristol, in October of 2010. On November 12th, the couple arrived in Cape Town, South Africa, for their honeymoon. They stayed at the Cape Grace, a 5-star hotel at the Victoria and Alfred waterfront. That same day, at the airport, they hired a taxi shuttle driven by Zola Tongo, 31 years old. The hotel cameras began recording immediately. At the Cape Grace, on the second day, cameras in the hotel forecourt recorded Shreen and Tongo talking privately for 5 minutes, while Annie went inside alone. Tongo would later testify that it was at that moment that Shreen made the direct proposal. He wanted the wife taken out of the picture. The total agreed upon among those involved would be 15,000 rand, approximately 5,000 rials at the exchange rate of the time. Tongo accepted and recruited an intermediary, Mondimbolombo, a receptionist at another hotel, and 2 gunmen. On the night of November 13th, Saturday, Tongo drove the couple on a nighttime outing past the waterfront and then toward Gugulethu, one of the most violent townships in Cape Town. The staged kidnapping began there. Two armed men, Mziwamadoda Kwabe and Solile Mangani, got into the taxi. Shrien and Tongo were expelled from the vehicle at different points along the route, both theoretically as victims. Annie remained in the back seat. On the morning of the 14th, she was found dead in the abandoned taxi in Khayelitsha. The cause of death was a single gunshot to the neck, fired by Mangani at point-blank range. 3 days later, on November 16th, a camera from another area of the Cape Grace recorded a decisive moment. Shrien Dewani entered the hotel's internet room carrying a white plastic bag. Zola Tongo accompanied him. The two spoke briefly. When they left, it was Tongo who had the bag. According to the driver, inside was 1,000 rand in cash. The first installment of the payment for the murder. Tongo, Kwabe, and Mbalambo confessed involvement and blamed Shrien. Tongo got 18 years. Kwabe got 25. Mangani got life and died in 2014 of a brain tumor in prison. Shrien was extradited from the United Kingdom in 2014 to face trial. But in December of that year, Judge Jeanette Traverso ended the case before the defense needed to speak. Tongo's testimony, the centerpiece of the prosecution, was considered full of contradictions. Without it, there was not enough evidence, and Shrien returned to Bristol acquitted. Case number 12. The garage sale in Tomball. Elizabeth Barraza, known as Liz, was a stormtrooper cosplayer who visited children's hospitals dressed as a Star Wars character. Married for nearly 5 years to Sergio in Tomball, Texas. Their 5th wedding anniversary would be in a few days. They had a trip planned to Universal and Disney. On the morning of January 25th, 2019, Liz woke up before 7 to set up a garage sale in front of the house. Sergio had already left for work. 4 minutes after Sergio left, at 6:58, the doorbell cameras of Liz's house and neighbors recorded the arrival of a black pickup truck. The driver parked a few lots ahead, got out, walked toward Liz's entrance, and started a conversation with her. Liz's doorbell camera captured her, saying good morning in the tone of someone who does not know the person. 30 seconds later, without warning, the man drew a weapon and fired 4 times. Liz fell. The shooter fired 1 more time at her on the ground. The shooter walked back to the pickup truck and sped off. 3 different neighbors called 911 in the following seconds. Liz was taken to a nearby hospital and died shortly after. The case became a puzzle for the Tomball police. It was not a robbery. Nothing was taken. The shooter did not say a single word captured by the audio. The extra shot with the victim already down suggests a planned execution, professional hit style, but nobody could identify any motive for anyone to want Liz dead. Other cameras in the area showed the pickup truck circling the neighborhood hours before the crime, parked in nearby lots. Whoever did this knew the couple's routine, knew the exact time Sergio left, knew Liz would be alone, but the garage sale had been decided the night before. Liz had not posted anything on social media. There was no logical reason for a stranger to know. The police investigated Sergio and cleared him. Investigated people with grudges? Nothing. 6 years later, the case remains unsolved. Case number 13. The snow shovel fight in Plains Township. On February 1st, 2021, a snowstorm hit the northeastern United States. It accumulated more than 30 inches in some areas. In Plains Township, Pennsylvania, James Goy and his wife, Lisa Goy, were clearing snow from the parking spots in front of their house on West Berg Street. To get rid of the snow, they crossed the street and dumped everything on the property of the neighbor across the street, Jeffrey Spade, a United States Navy veteran. Spade had already argued with the Goys during a previous snowstorm 2 months earlier over the same issue. That morning, he came out of his house also clearing snow from his own garage, saw the couple continue dumping, crossed the street, and asked them to stop. The security cameras of the Goys' house recorded everything. The argument escalated in seconds. Heavy insults were exchanged by both sides, with James waving his fist at Spade and Lisa screaming, go ahead, several times in a row. Spade went back inside his house for less than a minute. He returned with a pistol in his hand. The Goys saw the weapon and continued yelling from the street. Spade opened fire. He hit both of them multiple times. They fell on the snow-covered asphalt, but were still alive. Spade went inside again. He came back with an AR-15 style rifle. He walked to where they lay and fired at point-blank range to ensure both deaths. The Goys' 15-year-old son, who was autistic, was inside the house and heard everything from close by. The Plains Township police arrived at the scene just before 9:20. They found the bodies of James and Lisa in the street. While they surrounded Spade's house, they heard a single gunshot from inside. When they entered, Spade was dead. Spade had no prior criminal record, was a decorated Navy veteran, and had lived in the neighborhood for years. The Goys' son went to live with his paternal grandparents. Case number 14, the garbage chute in Melbourne. Phoebe Hansjuk was 24 years old. She lived in the 12th floor apartment of the Balancea, a luxury building on St Kilda Road in Melbourne, Australia. The apartment belonged to her boyfriend, Anthony Hampel, 43, son of Supreme Court judges. On the night of December 2nd, 2010, The building's concierge went to the trash compactor room in the basement looking for a broom. The door would not open. She pushed hard. When she entered, she found Phoebe's body stretched out on the floor. Phoebe had fallen through the garbage chute, from the 12th floor to the compactor in the basement, a drop of more than 130 feet. She survived the impact. The examinations showed she died from hemorrhaging on the floor after the fall. The compactor blades had nearly severed one of her feet. Homicide investigators concluded in 7 days that no third parties were involved. They concluded that Phoebe entered the chute, standing voluntarily under the effects of alcohol and the sleeping pill Stilnox. The problem is the geometry. The chute measured approximately 24 inches by 9 inches. Phoebe was about 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed about 121 pounds. Independent experts would later consider, at the 2014 inquest, it virtually impossible for someone of average size to voluntarily squeeze into that opening alone without leaving marks. No fingerprints were found in the chute or in the room where it was located. The door to the room required activation. Blood in Hempel's apartment was never fully analyzed. The building's CCTV would have been the key piece of the case, but the police did not collect the hard drive at the time of death. Instead, they left the equipment under the responsibility of the building management. A large portion of the critical recordings from the afternoon and early evening ended up being overwritten and lost. Phoebe's grandfather, Lorne Campbell, a retired detective of the Victoria Police, opened a parallel investigation. He concluded his granddaughter had been murdered. The police refused to reopen the case. The coroner's inquest lasted 14 days in 2014. The final report ruled out both suicide and foul play at the same time and classified the case as a freak accident. The family considered it impossible and rejected the conclusion. Today, more than a decade later, the case remains without official reopening. Case number 15, The Woman on the Trail Camera. On May 12th, 2022, a government inspector was conducting a land survey in a wooded area near the National Guard Armory in Westboro, North Carolina. Behind the building, he found a complete human skeleton. Next to it, a black blouse and women's leggings. The report indicated death between 9 and 12 months earlier. Strangely, local police did not publicize the find immediately. In January of 2024, a Westboro resident contacted the authorities. He had images from August 21st, 2021 on his trail camera installed to photograph wildlife. A woman appeared, perhaps in her early 30s, walking barefoot through the forest in the early morning hours. She used a branch as a walking stick. The leggings and the stick were wet up to the knee. She had crossed a creek to the south of the trail. She was wearing the same black blouse and leggings found with the skeleton. The image was submitted to the National Missing Persons database. The woman's mother recognized her daughter immediately. It was Amber Ray Johnston, 36 years old, missing since August of 2021. DNA confirmed the identification in March of 2025. Amber was from Bullhead City, Arizona, on the other side of the country, more than 2,100 miles from Westboro. She had boarded a Greyhound bus in mid-August. She was seen purchasing a ticket in Winston-Salem on August 17th. The last ping from her phone was in Charlotte. The Westboro police never treated the death as a possible homicide. Amber had a history of domestic abuse with her ex, Jared Ward, who had returned to South Carolina. Her SNAP benefits and credit card were used by other people, including Jared, after the presumed date of death. Jared died of an overdose in 2022. The case remains open.